Hello and welcome to part two of our speaker series on how to improve your public speaking. So this is about constructing speeches. I've put long prep speeches in parenthesis because in some public speaking formats such as BP debating or WSTC debating, you only get 50 minutes or an hour from hearing the topic to when the debate starts. In those circumstances, you simply don't have enough time to properly construct a speech in the way that I'm going to talk about in this video. So this video is about crafting a speech, assuming that you have days, perhaps weeks and months, but at least days to craft a speech. I've also quite deliberately put constructing rather than writing because you shouldn't write speeches, which is helpfully slide one. If you're not a professional speechwriter, you should not be writing a speech. Now, I'm going to do a full video on this quite soon because it is the most common advice that I give out, and it's often it's pretty much always the most commonly ignored advice as well. The full sort of plethora of reasons for doing this is quite large, and I think probably does deserve more attention. But I'm just going to say this. For now, if you write out a speech, you've written an essay. If you then speak that essay aloud, you are reading aloud. Reading aloud is not public speaking, and it will sound bad. Because when you speak, you are naturally quite engaging. Your body language, your tone, your pitch all match the words that are going through your brain because you're working as one system. When you're reading aloud words that you're not coming up with in real time, you sound bad. There's a discord between what your body language is doing and what words you are saying. If you've ever heard someone speak and there hasn't been anything obviously bad about the speech, but you've just not been listening or not been engaged or not been that impressed, 9 times out of 10 it's because they're reading a script. And most people are terrible when reading scripts. Ironically, the only way to get good at reading scripts in public speaking sense, this is not obviously about drama and acting, is actually to get very good at being off script, and then you can actually get better at reading on a script. But you have to be able to give speeches with notes, and those speeches have to not be memorized or written out, and you have to get good at that skill before you can start writing out your speeches, and most people just never get to that stage. So for now, don't write out your speeches. Craft them, construct them in the way that we're going to talk about now. First and foremost, I can't believe that this is advice that I have to give out almost every time I do a workshop, but it is. You have to practice speeches. And for me, that means right from the get-go, your first draft, your second draft, your third draft, these are all verbal drafts because, again, speeches are speaking, they're not written. So the very start that the very beginning of any speech construction for me is having a think about whatever the topic is that I'm speaking about and why I want to speak about it. Maybe I'll jot down a few ideas, but not many. And then at some point, I'll take 5 minutes or 10 minutes, however long a speech is going to be, I'll start my stopwatch or my recorder, and I'll just give a verbal first draft. Start to finish, just give the whole speech in 5 or 10 minutes, and it'll be a total mess, right? Because, of course, it will be the first time that I give it with limited preparation, no notes, and no rehearsal. Of course, it'll be a mess. But it's just me giving it to my mirror, so it doesn't matter. And it's good to get comfortable with that. It's good to get comfortable just talking off the top of your head and seeing what comes out. Because a lot of good ideas will come out. If you start your stopwatch and speak for like a minute and you're like, oh, that was crap, I'm going to start again, then you're not generating those ideas because you're weirdly self-conscious of giving bad speeches to no one but yourself. Start the recorder, give a speech for the length that you're going to be speaking for, or at least somewhere close to it. If it's like an hour-long speech, I mean, I don't know what you're doing if it takes an hour, but I can understand that maybe you don't want to do that for the full hour. But do it for a while, and try to approximate it to the full length, and then sit down. You've done it once. Take an hour, take a minute, take a day, and then do it again. Give a second verbal draft. And when you've done one or two of these, maybe jot down some notes. Things that you're definitely going to want to talk about, things that you're unsure about, and maybe some ideas if you have them at that point for your main points or main ideas, and or how you might want to start, how you might want to end. But nothing should be set right now. Nothing should be set in stone. It should all be in a sort of melding phase. You should just be focusing on getting in rehearsals. And when you get to sort of your third or fourth verbal draft, and bear in mind, these are a lot quicker to do than written drafts, which is another great advantage. And of course, it's all practice. Is at some point you want to start recording your speech on your phone and listening back to it and figuring out what you do well, what you're not doing well, what ideas are you explaining well, what ideas are you fumbling, what ideas are taking way longer than you thought, what points are not taking as long as you thought. Do you like the introductions that you're using? Do you have a good conclusion yet? Keep rehearsing, keep reviewing, refine your notes, going to talk about that in a minute, and the speech will come together more and more. And the speech will start to take on a familiar and consistent format and structure, but it shouldn't ever get to the stage where it's memorized word for word, because you need to have that adaptability to the crowd. You know, you can't always anticipate if a crowd are going to laugh at a joke, or if they're going to be leaning forward or leaning back, or if you're going to need to do a bit more work to engage them or not. And all that has to happen in a moment. So the speech can't be too rigid, because you can't write a one-size-fits-all speech, or at least I can't. In terms of notes, notes are great. They should be refined and added to throughout your rehearsals, and eventually you should have a set of very, very sparse, very clean notes. And these notes should be maybe 4 or 5 cue cards for a 10-minute speech with less than one sentence in each cue card that are just signposts to help you on your way if you forget what the next idea is or you get a little bit stuck. But they should not be screeds and screeds of writing. I find coloured notes really useful because the colour can have a secondary meaning. For example, if I want to get passionate or angry about an idea, I'm going to write it in red. And if I think I need to slow an idea down, I'm going to write it in blue. And that way, like if I turn to sort of, cue card 3 in my speech, oh, it's my second main idea, and see that it's written in blue, I'm going to know, okay, you always speak too fast on this, consciously slow down a little bit. With notes, less is definitely more. Too many notes, and you're basically just writing out a speech and cutting up on cue cards. As anyone who's ever written a dissertation knows, probably at some point, you're going to have 13,000 words where you were told it could only be 10,000. And you're going to have to do that editing job that's so tough to do, but really, really important for a good piece of writing or a good book and a good speech. You're probably going to find that you have 12 minutes when it's meant to be a 10-minute speech, maybe 12 minutes when it's meant to be a 5-minute speech. Even if you don't have a strict time cap, you may want to artificially give yourself a shorter time cap than you're taking in your rehearsals so that you're confident that all of your speech is tight and killer and is not fluff and tangents and filler. Sometimes you're going to have to be quite clinical and be like, look, I like this idea, I like this anecdote, I like this joke, but it's just, it doesn't really fit into the speech and it does just take up 30 seconds that I can't afford. And if you've got really key ideas that you want to go through, you've got to prioritize them because you can't just speed up and rush through a speech to jam in more content because fast speeches are bad speeches. You've got to watch your pacing. And what that means is that if you don't consciously cut the things that need to be cut, then you're going to unconsciously end up having to cut stuff that you didn't want to cut because in the moment you're going to overrun. I would say that the most important part of a speech is typically going to be the main idea, whatever that is, the introduction and the conclusion. Introductions and conclusions do matter. How you first come out, whether it's with some imagery or an analogy or a personal story, an anecdote, whether it's with a quote or a statistic, a graph, a meme, the way that you start a speech is going to set the tone for the speech, and it's going to decide quite quickly if the audience want to listen to you. Introductions are worth a lot of thought and a lot of experimentation and trying a few different ways of doing it. Similarly, conclusions, people will remember how your speech ended, and it's really worth having a good, interesting final minute or final 30 seconds and a really good last line. I would say that the last line should be like decided and set in stone. Maybe the first line as well, but just not the main body of the speech. It does matter to have structure. Um, when you start out, the structure can be as simple as introduction, three main ideas, conclusion. You might not even know what those three main ideas are when you start. You might just have some sort of potentials. If you end up with 10 main ideas or one or three, that's all good. Or four stories or two anecdotes or whatever type of speech this is. But there should be some structure to stop you getting confused between like this anecdote and this point and this idea that are sort of separate things, but you sort of melded them together because you weren't clear. Structure really does help. Thanks for watching. I hope this is useful in giving you some thoughts on how you should go about constructing a speech if you've got some time to build one. Next time we're going to look at the practice of modeling and how it interacts with the importance of authenticity. Being authentic in a speech is really, really important, but modeling, which is where we sort of learn from others, sort of copy others, seems like it might be at odds with authenticity because if you're sort of copying someone else, you're not being authentic. But actually, these two things can coexist, and they're both really important to good public speaking. So we hope to see you soon for that video. If you have any questions or comments, please put them below, and thanks for watching.